Have you ever woken up beside someone who loves you deeply and still felt utterly alone? That morning, the ceiling fan hummed above us, steady and indifferent, while my husband slept with the quiet confidence of a man who believed his life was settled. I stared at the ring on my finger and wondered how something so small could feel so heavy. I didn't know then that by nightfall, a single truth would crack open the careful story I'd been telling myself about love, loyalty, and my name is Emily, and I was 30 when I married Richard, a man 20 years older than me. People always paused when they heard our ages, their smiles tightening just enough to show the question they didn't dare ask. Why him? Why now? Richard was 50, established, calm in a way that made the world feel less sharp. We met at a charity fundraiser where I spilled red wine on his gray blazer. He laughed instead of scolding me, a deep, reassuring sound that felt like a warm hand on my back. At that time, I was exhausted by men my age, by the uncertainty, the half-promises, the way everything felt temporary. Richard felt solid. Intentional that we married after 2 years of dating. Our home was a restored colonial on a quiet street, with creaking floors and a garden he tended every Sunday morning. It smelled like old books, coffee, and lemon polish. On paper, my life looked enviable, a successful husband, financial stability, dinner parties with friends who admired our maturity. But there were gaps I didn't talk about. Richard had been married before, to Margaret, a woman who still hovered in our lives like a polite ghost. They shared an adult daughter, Claire, who was only 5 years younger than me. Family gatherings were cordial but strained, like everyone was carefully stepping around a crack in the floor. At night, when the house settled and Richard fell asleep, I often lay awake listening to the distant traffic, wondering if comfort and love were the same thing. I told myself this was what grown-up happiness looked like, quiet, predictable, safe. I ignored the small ache that whispered there should be more. The first crack appeared on an ordinary afternoon. I was looking for a tax document in Richard's study when his laptop chimed softly. An email preview flashed across the screen before it went dark again. That I still think about you. I froze. My heart thudded so loudly I was sure the house could hear it. Richard had never hidden his past, but this felt different, present, immediate. I told myself not to jump to conclusions, yet my hands trembled as I opened the laptop. I knew his password, he'd given it to me himself, a gesture of trust that now felt like a test. The emails weren't explicit, but they were intimate. Memories shared. Regrets hinted at. Late-night messages that ended with words like always and what if. Margaret's name filled the screen like a challenge. That evening, I watched Richard carefully over dinner. He talked about a new project at work, about the neighbor's noisy dog. His voice was steady, his eyes warm. I wondered how long he'd been living with this second, hidden conversation. Is something wrong? He asked, noticing my silence. That I shook my head too quickly. Just tired. But the tension followed me everywhere. When he touched my shoulder, I flinched. When his phone buzzed, my chest tightened. I started noticing how often he mentioned Margaret, always casually, always framed as concern or nostalgia. One night, after too much wine, I finally asked, "Do you ever miss your old life?" Richard paused, glass halfway to his lips. "Everyone misses parts of their past," he said carefully. "It doesn't mean they want to go back." "But do you?" I pressed that. He looked at me for a long moment, something unreadable passing across his face. "Emily, why are you asking this now?" "I just need honesty," I said, my voice barely steady. "From both of us." He reached for my hand. "You have it." But even as he said it, the silence between us said everything we were too afraid to speak aloud. I began questioning myself. Was I insecure because of the age gap? Was I imagining betrayal where there was only nostalgia? Still, the doubt grew roots. Then Claire invited us to her birthday dinner. Margaret would be there. The restaurant was dimly lit, all exposed brick and soft jazz. Margaret greeted us with a composed smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She looked elegant, familiar in a way that made my skin prickle. When she hugged Richard, it lingered a second too long. throughout dinner, memories flowed easily between them, inside jokes, shared glances. I felt like a guest at my own marriage, watching history reassert itself. Halfway through dessert, Margaret excused herself to the restroom. A few minutes later, Richard stood. "I'll be right back," he said. That I didn't know why I followed them. Maybe instinct. Maybe fear. I saw them in the hallway near the bathrooms, standing too close, their voices low. "I never meant to hurt her," Richard was saying. Margaret's voice cracked. "Then why do you keep coming back to me?" My breath caught. It was like stepping into a memory I didn't know I still carried, the feeling of being invisible, of being the second choice. "I love my wife," Richard said. "But you're still in love with me," Margaret replied softly. I stepped forward before I could stop myself. "Am I interrupting?" They both turned, shock written plainly on their faces. The truth hung between us, heavy and undeniable. Richard tried to explain, how it was never physical, how it was unfinished emotion, how age made you cling to familiar things. His words blurred together. "What hurts," I said quietly, "is that you didn't let me decide if this was something I could live with." Margaret looked at me then, really looked. "You deserve more than half a heart," she said, not unkindly. That was the moment everything shifted. Not with shouting or tears, but with clarity. I realized Richard hadn't married me because he was done with his past. He married me because I was safe, because I represented a future that asked less of him emotionally. That I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but I also couldn't deny the relief that came with finally knowing. That we drove home in silence. The house felt different when we entered, smaller, almost. That night, we talked honestly for the first time. About fear. About aging. About how love can exist alongside betrayal. That I didn't leave immediately. Healing, I learned, isn't dramatic, it's slow and uncomfortable. Richard ended his contact with Margaret. He apologized in ways that felt sincere, but apologies don't erase truth. Months later, I still don't know exactly where our marriage will land. Some days, I see a future built on honesty and growth. Other days, I imagine a life where I choose myself fully, without compromise. What I do know is this: love isn't proven by age or stability or good intentions. It's proven by courage, the courage to be honest, to risk loss, to face the parts of ourselves we'd rather keep hidden. That night taught me that silence can be the loudest betrayal of all. And whatever comes next, I refuse to live quietly again.